questions for them. We'll then have a 5-minute access break. We'll then return and head straight into hearing about the motions, proposals that have been submitted to go to the NUS National Conference. Finally, we're here thank you to our board, and then we'll close the AGM. Voting is now open online and will close in 48 hours at 5:30 p.m. on Friday, 4th February. Please head over to our KCLSU website to vote on approving the minutes from last year's AGM and to vote which motion should be submitted to the NUS National Conference. We'll hear more about the NUS motion proposals later this evening. Please note that we are recording this meeting. The recording will be available online on our AGM voting page so that any members who are unable to attend the meeting tonight can watch it back and can make an informed decision when going to vote. Throughout the meeting, we'll be asking for your thoughts and questions by asking you to raise your hands. We'll get through as many questions as possible, but we apologize in advance if we have to move on to the next section due to time constraints. If at any point you experience any technical difficulties but would still like to have your say, then please direct your message to Coco, who you can find in the participant list. Coco can support you with this or relay on your point to the chair to read on your behalf. KCLSU is led by 6 full-time officers, Zara, Aslan, Hamza, Fatima, Rebecca, and Daniela, who are elected to represent your views to the university and make sure student experiences at King's is the best possible. They've been in office since July 2021. We'll now hear from 3 of our student officers, Zara, Arslan, and Hamza. Whilst hearing from our officers, please raise your hand if you would like to ask a question. Once videos have played, start your way there.
Hi everyone, my name is Zara Sayyid and I'm your KCLSU president. I will walk you through some of the things that I've achieved in the 6 months in my role. So some of the things that I've been occupied with is making sure that the voices of those people who aren't always at the forefront of the conversation are heard. And I did this through bringing the voices of our Black students and our Muslim students to the forefront of these conversations by speaking to the college and advocating for their interests. Another thing that occupied my time was focusing on the issue of the drink spikings, for which I wrote to Southern Council, and we achieved a strong investigation into their pubs. Another thing that I have been busy with is advocating for the student voice at the highest governing body in the university, which is the College Council, whereby I highlighted the impacts of the freedom of speech bill. And lastly, one more thing that I've been occupied with is the UCU strikes, whereby we held a general members meeting to make this process as democratic as possible to represent our students. Now, this was a small proportion into the glimpse of the sabbatical officer life. I hope that you have enjoyed watching this, but there is plentiful that my officer team is working on and a lot more that I still have to do before my time is up. I hope we can make you proud, and thanks for watching.
Hi everyone, my name is Ahmed Zafar and I'm the Vice President for Activities and Development at KCLSU. When I started my role, I had multiple objectives. Some of the objectives I have been working on or have achieved are organizing different type of events, social events where students from different cultures could come and interact with each other. One of the examples of these type of events is Cross Culture Ball, which we are planning to organize in March. Secondly, I had an aim or vision to improve the career opportunities for students at King's. Therefore, I have been working closely with King's Care Services to enhance all the care services we provide to our students. And lastly, it was to enhance the activities experience at King's. An example of this could be that we have been working on organizing a smooth varsity event between the sports teams from King's as well as UCL. Over the time left in my role, I'll certainly try my best to enhance student experience as much as I can and would be happy to know any of the things you want me to achieve as well.
Hi everyone, so I'm Hamza, KCLSU's Vice President for Education, Arts and Sciences. I hope you're all doing well. I just thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the projects I've been working on throughout the year, just to name a few. At the moment, I'm working on trying to improve the exam support across the Arts and Sciences faculties for students, depending on the specific support each faculty needs. Also, I've been liaising with the King's Careers and Employability Service on trying to increase their student engagement to let students know more about some of the opportunities here at King's. I've also been working on an international project called Circle U, which is an alliance of European universities, 9 different European universities, looking at the future of what universities are, researching about the future. And finally, I've been working on an event called the Cultural Ball, One World Cultural Ball. It's been released at this point, so you guys can probably see posters about it around campus. It's essentially about celebrating our diversity and the different cultures we have here at King's. Hope to see you guys there.
Thank you very much for the videos. We will now be moving on to questions for student officers. You will now have 30 seconds to ask your questions, and the officers will have 1 minute to reply. If you do face any technical difficulties, please feel free to contact Stella in the group chat. At the moment, are there any questions? Seeing that there are no questions at the moment on the floor, I will be asking questions that were pre-submitted from students before. Let's kick off with a question to our president. The money that the SU receive comes in one big chunk from the university. As a student, I can't see extra society or event funding we can apply to, so I'm not sure where this money you speak of is available to us. Also, are you doing any work challenging KCL to ensure the unexpected student number raise doesn't happen again, as presumably student numbers are going to continue inflating?
Thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. So the conversation around our funding is quite a broad kind of, question, and I think there's a variety of different areas that we need to focus on. I think to give you a proper breakdown, I won't have enough or sufficient time, but if I could request, could I bring Gabriella in to give us a brief breakdown on where our majority of money goes in terms of the SU, as she's the best fit person to kind of highlight the finances. So Gabriella, would you like to come in? Gabriella? Do we have Zhao Li on the call?
No,
okay,
I'm here. Yeah, thank you. It's just that the unmuting process takes a minute, kind of 30 seconds.
Where does the SU spend majority of its money? And considering the block grant that we receive, and societies don't get the extra funding, what do we do with our money?
Well, actually, from this 4 million societies also get a considerable sum. It's roughly in the area of £100,000. But in terms of which areas we spend on, there will be later on a presentation, which will actually highlight that against our strategic themes, where have we deployed this fund? But generally, more than a third of it goes to representation, and the remaining 2/3 goes between social experience, future, and connections, which we will be presenting. And of course, this is a sum of various visible and less visible projects, like our advice team, all of the hubs people around, the Welcome Fair, the Black History Month, and the long list of events that we provide for students. So let's wait. I suggest that if we could wait until the presentation, and if you still have the same question, I try to answer it in more details. Otherwise, I'm happy to have a longer session in the office with those who really want to be a little bit more informed about this. I also would like to draw your attention to the annual report, which probably is something in the range of 40 pages, of which half is the financial result. It's worth going through. It's going.
Thank you very much For the responses. Due to shortage of time, we will now be moving on to the next question. Our next question is to our VP Activities and Development, Arslan. And the question is, I haven't seen any work on continuing to tackle extortion rent prices, such as the work cut rent did last year, helped by KCLSU. It was in the officers' manifesto, and all the efforts seem to have disappeared. Oh,
Yeah, yes, thanks for the question. So for the rent one, we obviously, we can't disclose the latest agreement on what exact rents are going to be for the next year, but I can tell you that there have been some reduction in the rent part. I certainly haven't been working too much on the rent part. There's another officer who was working on the rent one, but yeah, that's as much update as I can provide from my end, that there have been certain reductions, but we can't disclose it before the rents. Before all the details regarding rents go out in March, when students are allowed to book in.
thank you for the responses. Moving on to the next question to our VP Health, Fatima. How do you
Was Hamza?
Oh, Hamza, yes. How do you see the representation work continuing and changing?
Sorry, Anjali, could you just repeat the question? Representation with regards to what exactly?
Yes. So the question, I'll rephrase it now, is bringing the career service to the SU is only going to do so much for engagement. Isn't advertising their services to students their job and not something an officer should be doing? Alternatively, have you been doing any work on whether their support is helpful and appropriate to Black students or students of color, as was in your manifesto, or in further areas such as disability?
Okay, yeah, I guess it's kind of like a two-part question. And I think they're kind of interlinked in a certain way. Essentially, we've been working with the career service quite closely. And I agree that it's not necessarily our job to be the ones to achieve that, but it's our job to make this career service aware of these issues and make sure we're holding them account. So we've obviously had a lot of students come to us. I had it whilst I was a student, and had a lot of students come to me in this year saying, we don't really know what's going on with the career service. Like, how can we access it? How can we, what kind of support can we get? And what we've realized is all of the support is there on hand. Students just aren't aware about it, which is why I put that in my manifesto early on, which is making students more aware of these opportunities. So that's kind of something we're working on at the moment, which is saying, okay, let's see how we can increase the student engagement by using the student channels that we already have within the SU. So this could be societies, which are career-focused societies. This could be using our academic representatives who can maybe, share some of the opportunities that the career service is providing with their students. So that's essentially kind of the thing I'm working on. But I do agree, it's not necessarily our job explicitly, but it is something we have to hold them to account on.
Thank you very much for your response. We will now be moving on to the money bit. Part of the reason for holding these meetings each year is for you, the members of the union, to see how KCLSU is spending its money on making sure you get the best possible student experience during your time at King's. I'll now hand over to Zara, the KCLSU president, to talk you through this section.
Sorry about that technical issue. Thanks for that, Anjali. So I'll give you a rough overview on our accounts, and then I'll pass it on again to Gabriella to kind of give a proper breakdown. By the way, we will also give a written response to the questions that were sent in, but unfortunately, due to time, we aren't able to answer every single one of them. So every year we satisfy our statutory reporting requirements, which means that our accounts are audited and approved by the board and the AGM, and then filed to the Companies House and the Charity Commission, so that it's publicly accessible for everyone. The first page of the financial presentation shows our statutory income statement, and that shows that KCLSU has had an income of £8.4 million in 2021. In the same period, we spent £7.9 million, which means that we generated an income surplus of £640,000. Note that generating a surplus is an objective, is not an objective of our charity, but however, due to the COVID restrictions, we could not deploy some of our funds. For example, the funding that we give out to our sports teams to participate in university competitions. We also provide financial and administrative services to more than 400 student societies, which is also consolidated into our accounts. On the right side, you can see that our income analysis for 2021 shows that our block grant income was 4.3 million. Only 0.2 million of that greater than the year before, due to the fact that the block grant remained largely unchanged, apart from KCL providing us a 250 grant ad hoc fund. Our commercial income for 2021 was considerably low and lower and below the previous years, and this is because of the fact that our entertainment units were only open for 3 months. Could we move to the next slide, please? So if you can visualize that what 7.9 million was spent on, the 4 strategic themes were representation, futures, connections, and social experience, and these were approved by the board of trustees, and these are our themes, and this happened in 2019 to 2020. Apart from allocating direct costs against each strategic theme, for example, the advice theme, the futures theme, hubs, against connections, we also needed to allocate the space grant to support the cost against each theme based on the number of employees within each theme. The allocation shows that more than a third of our resources, 39%, was deployed for the purposes of student representation in 2021. The chart at the bottom kind of shows that and highlights the expenditure that we had per theme. So, for example, the representation cost us 3.71k. That was really awful pronunciation. So sorry for that, guys. But here you can just see the breakdowns of different costs that we had. Just to bounce it back to Gabriella. Gabriella, did I miss anything in that presentation that you want to highlight further for our student body?
No, specifically, maybe if there are any questions.
I'll then pass it back on to Anjali, who will continue the presentation. The AGM. Thank you.
Thank you. That has given you a whistle-stop tour of the finances for this year. I'll now introduce our panel who will be responding to questions on the trustees' annual reports and accounts. Our panel here includes the KCLSU Finances and Resources Director, Gabriella, and our Head of Finance, Zhao Li, as they would be happy to answer any questions you have about this year's financial report. Please raise your hand if you have any questions for the panel. You'll have 30 seconds to ask your questions, and the panel will have 1 minute to reply. Are there any questions at the moment? Yes, Alexandra.
Hello. Yeah, I'm going to ask possibly the obvious question about £634,000 surplus. Whilst I recognise that everything that's happened over the last 2 years is unusual, and banking some of that money away for reserves as well is helpful to make sure that we can keep doing what we're doing. What are the going forward plans for that money and being reinvested back into the student experience?
Thank you for the question, and the answer is we have already actually deployed the total sum of it, and about £400,000 is going to go into various investments. One of the biggest investments this year is to completely refurbish Guy's Bar, and actually next year we also plan to refurbish the premises, the entertainment areas in Bush House. But more importantly, we also plan to actually deploy generally better systems, EPOS system, for instance, that would serve students very well and make sure that services are more flawless and we don't have various shortages of various stock items that the student may desire to consume. And that's roughly 400,000, as I mentioned. The remaining 200,000 was about to support the losses we accumulated this year by having much lower, basically commercial activity due to the COVID in particular in kind of December, January. If these reserves may not be needed, then obviously these funds should be redeployed to probably next year.
Thank you for the response. We'll now hear from the remaining three of our student officers, Fatima, Rebecca, and Daniela. Whilst hearing from our officers, please raise your hand if you would like to ask any questions.
Hi everyone, my name is Fatima Patel and I'm the Vice President Education for Health at KCLSU. And some of the things that I've been working on in my role will be improving student representation by having more staff hired, also working towards decolonizing the curriculum by making suggestions to the university, as well as trying to improve student satisfaction so that students get the best experience that they can at King's. I know that there's still a lot of things for me to do while I'm still in my role, but I'm looking forward to making use of the rest of my time to improve the student experience.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Selling and I'm Vice President Postgraduate. This past year I've been working on a couple of things, including our in-person welcome fair. I've also worked on members meetings, specifically the Keep It Real members meeting, which I chaired, and the Strike members meeting, for which I did a lot of campaigning with students. I've also been working on various postgraduate related issues, such as postgraduate finance, when I worked with other sabbatical officers across the country, and we're putting together a campaign at the moment. I'm also working on a postgraduate event series, and I look forward to seeing them come to fruition. As you can tell, there's still a lot to do, and I look forward to spending the rest of my term time working on these challenges to improve the King's student experience.
Hello, King's family. My name is Mohammad Daniel Ubaidullah. I'm your Vice President, Welfare and Community at the KCLSU. This past year in office, I've been working on a variety of objectives to improve the student experience at King's. One of the core objectives that I worked on this year was the bidet showers project. It involves installation of bidet showers on toilets across campuses so that they become more accessible for our wide variety of students who come from different cultural and religious backgrounds. I've also been working on my secondary objective of empowering individual students to organize events on campus just like societies do. In doing so, I've been liaising with the My Campus Space facility and popularizing it so that students can book rooms, venues, and facilities and organize events of their own. There is much more that I have planned for students for the rest of my term, and I will keep you duly updated on all of this. In the meantime, I'd like all of you to send me your valuable suggestions to improve these projects and their relevance to our student community.
Unfortunately, Danielle isn't able to be present with us in the meeting, so our questions will only be directed to Fatima and Rebecca. Are there any questions at the floor at the moment? Seeing that there is none, we will now be asking questions that were pre-submitted by students. Fatima, a question to you from a student. How do you see the representation work continuing and changing? Now the rep person is in place and reps have been trained. Are they supported, and what more work will you work on?
Thank you for that, Anjali. I think just to answer the first part of the question with how do I see representation work continuing and changing, I think right now we are looking to address some of the core challenges that have been raised through multiple challenges and through an audit that was compiled. So right now we are in a long-term agreement between KCLSU and King's to help redefine the future of student voice and representation. And we're hoping this agreement will promote some kind of co-creation of the student experience where we can effectively train our reps and have the right representatives, whether that be academic representatives, our liberation networks, or our student officers, work with the university to ensure that students are getting exactly what they want. And I think with the second part of the question about how we've now hired a new community representation coordinator, I think that it has been quite helpful to have someone in place to ensure that reps are supported, to ensure that they're able to gather some of the data, they're able to answer some of the questions. And of course, I think it would be very helpful to have another community representation coordinator in the future to support the one that we already have right now. But I think also our community representation coordinators do a lot of research. And I think with that research, they kind of help to support the students that are already been elected.
Thank you for your response. Due to shortage of time, we will now be moving on to another question for Rebecca. Rebecca, what work has been done on supporting in-person teaching as described by your following your campaign in the Keep It Real, and how is that being balanced with a continuingly uncertain future with COVID?
Thank you for that question. So I've been working with the Keep It Real campaign to ensure that students get as much in-person teaching as possible. And recently we had a meeting with Adam Fagan, who's the Vice President Education at King's, and Darren Wallace, who is the Executive Director of Student Experience. And we wanted to ensure that the campaign's asks, and essentially the students' asks, as we had a members meeting, were actually upheld. So we discussed moving forward how to return to in-person teaching, and have found that if students are dissatisfied with the amount of in-person teaching that they are receiving, that they should reach out to KCLSU, specifically me, and then I can help hold King's to account on returning to in-person teaching.
Thank you for your response. We will now be moving to a 5-minute access break. Please feel free to resume within 5 minutes. Welcome back from the break and thank you for staying with us. We're now going to move on to the next items on the agenda, which are for you to vote on. These are motions that students have submitted for KCLSU to send to the NUS National Conference. The motion that receives the most votes and passes will go through a further vote process with NUS delegates from across the nation. The final 8 policies voted in by NUS delegates will be discussed at the NUS National Conference, which involves students coming together from across the UK to decide on national policy and campaigns. It will be discussed and debated at NUS conferences as well, and if it passes there, it will become an NUS policy. However, just to clarify, this does not become a KCLSU policy. As we now move on to the debate, I just want to touch on how this will work on the Teams call. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I'll be calling out in order of the hands raised. You'll each have up to 1 minute to make your point to ensure that this is fair. I'll first ask you to state your point of whether you are for or against the motion. In order to make sure that this debate is fair and balanced, we'll only be going back and forth for the for and against points. So if you are next in line with your hand raised but are arguing for the same side, then you'll be asked to wait until we hear a point from the opposite side. If that makes sense, please show me a thumbs up. Thank you. If you have any issues with using your mic throughout the debate, please direct message Stella White, who can pass on your argument to me or help resolve any mic issues. We now have roughly 12 minutes for each motion, so let's get started. The first motion has been proposed by Raul Sabedi Gill on full support for GTAs and other students that are staff and UCU members on strike. Raul will now have 1 minute to make their opening statement.
Hello, can you hear me? Just to confirm. Thank you very much, and thank you to all for attending this meeting. Basically, myself, I'm a GTA. That means that I'm a PhD postgraduate student and also a worker for the university. And last year I was a news conference delegate, and we have noticed that there is a problem to make proposals on student fees and the model of financing of universities if we don't have a joint fight between workers, academic workers, and students. So I understand basically that the last vote that the union had on supporting the strike was not in favor, but I think that the National Union of Students should have the support, should support Unison and USU as unions to strike down all UK universities to change the financial system. Basically, the only way that we can change, for example, the pay for GTA students, that we are also workers in the university. The only way to scrap fees and the only way to change how UK universities.
Thank you for your question. Your time is up. Now, are there any participants who are wishing to speak against the motion? Okay. I believe, Sidi, you had your hand up. Are you speaking against?
Hi, sorry, I just joined. I was wondering if this was the time when we could ask questions to the officers.
No, we're currently discussing motions against. Hassan Arun?
Hi, I'm speaking for the motion, not against the motion.
Sorry, technical issue. So if we do not have someone that is willing to speak against the motion, is it okay if I make a remark to speak against the motion so that the people that are for the motion have an opportunity to come in? This way we can ensure that we have a balanced debate. By no means these are my views. I'm just trying to open the floor for the debate. So, oh God, okay. Full support and other students and stuff, okay. I will debate against this motion because I believe that I don't personally believe, but students have suffered enough during the COVID pandemic, and further call for action to strike will make it more difficult for students to proactively succeed in their education, and we should call for an end to a strike and support students in their education.
Are there now any students wishing to speak for the motion, please? Hassan Arun?
Hi. I'm for the for the strike. I just feel students and staff has to come together because there is an objective need for us to come together because we are paying high fees, and even the accommodation costs are high. Even our professors are being underpaid. Particularly GTS. For the hourly basis, pay is very meager. At the same time, they're not they have this job insecurity, so we have this common ground for us to come together because we have this common experience of being exploited by the management of higher fee. At the same time, our GTAs and our the professors, and we are being underpaid. So I think it is a broader interest of the students to come together. Yes, we have suffered in the pandemic, but we are suffering on multiple counts of increasing commercialization of through higher fees and accommodation costs. So I'm just supporting for the students and the professors to come together and participate in the strike because we have a broader questions to address.
Thank you for your response. Sorry, due to time constraints, we will now be moving on to the motion against. Is there any motions at the moment? Savannah, you've had your hand up.
Hi, sorry, can you hear me? Cool. Yeah, I want to speak in support of the motion. So I don't know if someone needs to speak against it first, but yeah.
That's okay. You can carry on speaking for the motion then.
Great, thank you. Cool, yeah, firstly, I guess I wanted to say in response to the arguments against that GTAs are students, so any arguments that are being made around kind of student well-being or the fact that students have suffered during the.
Is there any students at the moment on the floor who would like to speak against the motion? Zara?
So again, so we can turn back to the debate. There's only one motion that can go forward to NUS, and I wish that to be my motion, so I am against this motion because only one motion can go forward. Yeah, we can go back.
Are there any motions for Savannah?
Sorry, I thought I was just speaking then. I'm a bit confused. Should I continue? I don't know if my mic was off. I can continue. Or okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah, basically GTAs are students. So any arguments being made about students, we need to remember that GTAs are students too. Also, in terms of ending the strike, I agree this is really disruptive to everyone. The best way to end the strike quickly is for the student body to come out in support of the striking workers, to let management know that you're really angry. I'm really angry. This shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be in this situation. So the best thing that you can do is come and join us on the picket line, contact management, let them know that you're pissed off, and let them know that they need to stop exploiting their workers, who are also their students. I would also like to say that the same kind of system and the same members of management, the same logics that are raising your university fees every year that mean that you're paying thousands and thousands of pounds a year for this education are exactly the same logics, and it's the same system that are the ones that are instituting a growing, for example, racial and gender pay gap that are leading to more and more workers being increasingly precarious. And my last and final point is that this is a diversity issue, so disproportionate numbers.
Thank you for the response. Due to time constraints, we will now be moving on to the second motion, which has been proposed by Zara Sayyid on climate change. Zara will now have 1 minute to make their opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Anjali. So I made a motion on climate justice, and I believe that the NUS has not paying enough kind of attention to this particular area when it comes to the conversation around climate. I highlight this because I believe that the climate justice, the climate change campaign has predominantly been based around white narratives, and I believe that bringing in the climate justice element of it will highlight the marginalized voices and also highlight the fact that climate change actually impacts the global south the most. Hence why bringing in more diversity and hearing the minority voices in the climate justice campaign are very, very pertinent. This is why I propose that climate justice should be the motion that goes to NUS, so we can have a discussion about the floods in Bangladesh, about how conversations about sustainability are a privilege, how talking about climate change is a privilege, and how research on sustainability is also a privilege. So those are my arguments.
Okay, are there any participants who would like to speak against the motion? Rebecca?
Thank you. This is not necessarily my own view, but for the sake of debate, I thought I'd mention it. At King's, we already have quite good sustainability targets and progression on sustainability. So why should King's, who's already doing very well in terms of sustainability and reaching for a carbon neutral state, essentially, lobby NUS to care about climate justice?
Are there any participants who would like to speak for the motion?
Can I come back in?
Yes. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Anjali. Sorry, we're clearly experiencing a little bit like of IT issues, but nonetheless, I believe that the reason why we should focus on the climate justice element of it is it's well and great that we're talking about climate change and we're talking about COP26, but if we're not bringing in the voices of those who are more marginalized, this campaign does not have the power and does not have the credibility, in my view, that it can have if we do bring the climate justice campaign into it. So that's why we should incorporate it and why it should go forward to NUS.
Are there any motions against at the moment? Seeing that there is none, thank you very much for all speakers. We will now be moving on to the next motion. The third motion has been proposed by Joseph Wiltshire on calling on NUS to save the in-person university experience. Joe will now have 1 minute to make their opening statement. Joe, if you're present, could you please raise your hand? As Joe is currently not present in the room, I will be handing over Zara so she could present his motion on his behalf. Over to you, Zara.
Thank you so much for that, Anjali. So presenting on behalf of Joseph Wiltshire, calling on NUS to save the in-person university experience. Everyone, hear me out. We've been having online teaching for the past, 2 years in this pandemic. We are sick and tired of being in our rooms, having to study behind our laptops. We crave the in-person experience. We want to speak to students. We want to have engagement on campus. We want to be university students. We didn't come to university to sit behind, a laptop. So I want NUS to kind of advocate for a full in-person university experience, or in person where it can be. So this is why I feel like we should all kind of collectively mobilize and pressurize the NUS to actively pay attention on bringing back the university experience and keeping it real.
Are there any participants who would like to speak against the motion? Please raise your hand up. Raul?
Thank you. As I was news delegate the last year, one of the things that we argued is that making the face-to-face experience like the main argument of news just enforces the division between students and staff, because staff, basically, we try to comply with security and health measures. And we feel that if we don't have the opportunity to make mixed online learning, we cannot protect students if we still have a virus. And also, this is not a thing that news can act upon, because basically the restrictions are brought by parliament and government. So we don't have options, because these are health measures. And I feel it can foster the feel that we can go against health measures that are from government to protect health of everyone.
Thank you for the response. Are there any participants who would like to speak for the motion? Please raise your hand up. Rebecca?
Thanks, Anjali. So I think that is a good point. You know, COVID is still ongoing, but I also think that we need to start thinking about what happens after the pandemic is over, or after we've, adjusted to this new normal to the point where, getting a COVID jab is normal, or, wearing a mask is more normal. So I think the idea of saving the in-person university experience is very much around sort of what happens outside of the COVID restrictions that are being placed. At least that's my interpretation of the motion.
Are there any participants who would like to speak for the motion? Alexandra?
I want to speak against, which is what we're on now. If that's cool.
Sorrel
yes,
first.
go ahead.
Sure, great. So I actually agree a lot with what Rebecca's just said, in the sense that we need to be thinking long term beyond this pandemic. And I think that's actually what the motion number 1, as presented by Raul and backed up by Hassan, says. It says that it's not good enough to just have a university experience that's in person now, because what does that mean? What we need to be doing is actually fighting for an education system that works for everyone permanently, that works for students and staff, and that eliminates things like gaps in pay, gaps in accessibility, physical and beyond, and that works for everyone. So I think that's really what we're here to do, and that's much more well achieved and sustainable from motion 1 than it is from motion 3.
Thank you for the response. Are there any participants who would like to speak for the motion? Zara?
Yeah, I'll come in. I'll come in for the motion. Thank you for that, Anjali. So, whilst we understand that accessibility needs and education and a curriculum that works for all is important, I think the argument initially started because there was a real fear and a real threat of having a majority online learning experience or a very hybrid focused learning experience. However, what the motion is calling for is saving the university experience itself, making sure that people that want to be on campus and engage and socialize in that university experience, that is kept safe, and that is promoted. And also we recognize that everyone, that the factors such as pay and accessibility are pertinent, very pertinent. It's also really important to realize that students really value the in-person experience of education and academia. And
Thank you for the response. Due to time constraints, we will now be moving on to the fourth motion, which has been proposed by Fatima Patel for Decolonize and Diversity in the Medical Curriculum. Fatima will now have 1 minute to make her opening statement.
Thank you for that, Anjali. So over the years, we've seen institutions embedding lessons and resources which focuses on the impacts of colonialization and racism and the way that we function in society. And I think a lot of that focus has gone into arts and humanities and social sciences. However, I think it's important that we also address those kind of issues and the impacts that racism and colonialism has on the medical curriculum and the healthcare curriculum and also the scientific research curriculum. I think it's important that we understand that there's been a lot of instances in the past where there's been unethical scientific practices, there's been unethical medical practices, and to be honest, we still see a lot of issues in today's world. For example, we know that Black women that are pregnant are more likely to suffer compared to white individuals that are pregnant when it comes to receiving healthcare treatment. And it's very unfortunate that those kind of situations are still occurring in this day and age. And I think if we put in more efforts to educate our students about these issues.
Thank you for the response. Sorry, due to time constraints, we will now be moving for a motion against the motion. Is there any participants who would have their ideas against the motion, please? Zara?
I'm gonna say it now. I don't want to be like held accountable for the things that I'm saying in today's debate because it has to be balanced. I'm gonna run with I believe that climate justice should go to the NUS. Henceforth, I don't support the motion on decolonizing and diversifying the medical curriculum. So yeah.
Are there any participants who are for the motion? Could you please raise your hand? Fatima, would you like to expand on your motion and your ideas? Abdus?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, you know, if we don't have a diversified curriculum, how are we going to solve the bigger problems like climate change? Diversifying our curriculum is like the basics. And if we don't solve that, I don't think we can solve bigger problems. So we need to focus on these problems as well.
Thank you for your response. Are there any participants who would like to speak against the motion? Please raise your hand. Savannah?
Hey, yeah, I want to say I think this motion is like really, really important and really, really great. The reason that I'm speaking against it is that I feel like one of the best ways that we can actively start to decolonize the university more broadly is to kind of really seriously engage with why there is such a, for example, disparity in the pay for lecturing staff and teaching staff who come from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. And so, yeah, I guess this is nothing against the content of this motion because I think it's really fantastic. But I think if we want to talk about really actively decolonizing the university, I think we need to really think about diversifying the workforce at the university. And I think the way that that's going to happen is through really getting behind the strikes because, precarious workers are disproportionately racialized staff. And one of the great barriers to getting into university teaching is the fact that it's really precarious. So, yeah, just to reiterate, I think this is a great motion, but I think that motion 1 is going to be really crucial in terms of actually meeting some of
Thank you for the response. Due to time constraints, we will now have to move on to the next section. So thank you very much for all speakers and for the motions. That's all the motions for today. To vote on these motions, please head to our KCLSU website by 5:30 p.m. this Friday. Now, on to any other businesses for this meeting. The spring election nominations are now open, which hopefully all of you are aware, which include the positions of our 6 full-time student officers. If you're interested in finding out more, please feel free to check out our website at www.kclsu.org/elections. I will now be introducing Dennis, who is our Chief of Executive Officer.
Thank you so much for that, Anjali, and I hope I have more than 1 minute and I'm not cut off, right? Because these are thank yous, so I would appreciate that. Look, I think without a shadow of a doubt, it needs to be acknowledged that AGMs don't actually happen as enigmas. There's a lot of work that actually goes into this with the prep work that Anjali has taken part in, as well as the conversation that the officers have had prior to this, as well as the students that would have actually considered all of the motions and coming to this. And so just wanted to thank everyone today for actually coming and taking part in this session. But there are a few notable thanks that I do actually have to make. I think firstly, I do have to actually thank all of our trustees that have actually attended today, and that includes our sabbatical officers who's also actually presented in their capacity as representatives. So that's Zara, Hamza, Arslan, Fatima, Daniel, Rebecca. Rebecca, I hope I've actually included everyone in that thing, so thanks to yourselves. Equally at the same time, I did want to actually thank our staff members that have actually organised the session, and this goes down to our project staff members, so that's Rebecca, Pictonelli, Coco, Stella, Gamal, Sophia, Roshin, Nicole, Gabriella, Caroline, Jowley, that for the work that they've done. And then equally, what I did want to actually say a special thanks to was Anjali, our student chair. One of the key reflections that I did want to actually share is the fact that we know that AGMs in general tend to actually be in person. We know that there was a demand for these to be in person, where people can at least come onto campus and go through that. And that's something that we'll be reviewing to actually make in the future. And more importantly, I know that there was a response in terms of what the union does with its resources and its finances. Just to touch on that point, that information has to be made transparent, and that equally that information is available on both the Charities Commission website as well as on Companies House, because we are a charitable company limited by guarantee that gives a full audited accounts of how we've actually spent our money. And at the same time, I just want to actually save a special thanks for the end, and that special thanks needs to actually yet again be reiterating two people. One, obviously, groups of people. One, yet again, over to Anjali as the chair. Another one over to our president, Zara, for the work that they've been doing. And then last but not least, over to our project manager, Tanya, who's actually been behind the scenes of actually putting all of these things together. So with that being said, just wanting to actually thank everyone for taking part in this session. It's been a helpful debate to actually observe. We'll take all of that information back and decide how best to actually move forward with that. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Dennis, for the lovely support and message. And thank you very much, everyone, for attending today's annual general meeting. I will now be handing over my role to Zara.
Thank you so much. Next year we won't have those problems, but thank you so much, Anjali, for chairing today, and thank you everyone who's attended. It's been a really, really fruitful and delightful discussion, and it's been lovely to speak to so many different students and really see kind of the energy that students bring. And I think before we just leave, again, I really want to extend my gratitude and thank yous to Anjali for chairing. It's a really, really tough job, so well done. Really proud of you. And Tanya, who's been really, really amazing and is our project manager and has put in so much effort in running this AGM. So Tanya, you're amazing. We love you. Just a reminder that you can now go and vote on the motions, and there will be a £50 prize draw when taking part in the voting. So you don't want to miss out on that. Who doesn't love free money or a free prize or a good prize? So with that being said, thank you for coming. You guys are great. Have a lovely evening and take care. Bye.